Ragtime carried the folk music of frontier days over into the newly developing urban life. It is our folk music made the basis of a national music. The ragtime pioneers took folk style as a point of departure and created from it a permanent written form. Composers like Vaughan Williams, D. Lewis, and Holst worked in music the same way as Turpin, Joplin, Scott, and Lamb. It is important we see ragtime as a significant part of this development of black cultural traditions. Ragtime was the vanguard for the musical and cultural revolution of the African American in the 20th century. With the advent of ragtime, a new and positive image of the black artist was available, largely through his own Herculean efforts. Ragtime implicitly proclaimed that black artists stood on their own feet, met life's demands, and triumphed. It was an idea, and that idea was freedom, expressed in a syncopation that danced and shouted over the steady, double beat that, like the old law and order, sought to restrain it, but sought now in vain. The melodies of ragtime were gay, infectious, enchanting, enticing. Its harmonies often rich, sometimes haunting, but its intoxicating compulsion came from within the depths of its symbolic drama, the triumph of freedom over slavery. So did the syncopated music of New Orleans develop, both from African sources that were stronger and nearer, and from a far different folk music than that which fed the beginnings of ragtime elsewhere. The melodic line and the harmony have a romantic quality derived from both the classic and the folk music of France, Italy, and Spain. The rhythm is even more African, more strongly accentuated, and in a sense wilder and more unrestrained than that of the classic ragtime of the Joplin school. The term stomp, used to designate a hot number of dynamic rhythm, was derived in New Orleans from the stomping of bare feet in the bamboula and the Congo. Such a Joplin rag as Pineapple is filled with the feeling of folk ballad, schottish and real, and the forceful rhythms of its concluding strains recall the buck and wing, and the Kunjine rag of the roustabouts. In an Eastern masterpiece like James P. Johnson's Carolina Shout, one can literally hear the high shout of one worshiper and the answering outburst of the ecstatic congregation. Thus, Negro ragtime might have been seen in at least 4 different lights. First, as joyous and creative dance and entertainment music. It reflected the backgrounds of men raised in the black subculture who now had the opportunity to bring their music to the larger public. Second, as parody, it juxtaposed the inane grin of the minstrel show against the underlying misery of a suppressed race. Third, as an expression of triumph, it pitted the old law and order against the new freedom from slavery. And finally, as an expression of the loss of innocence, it placed the old man-made folk music in a new, mechanized context. Ragging was the process of syncopating a melody, of adapting it to various standard ragtime rhythms. Most important early jazz musicians took from ragtime a sense of structure. Their own compositions are often shaped like classic rags, with multiple themes, repeats, a complex organization different from either folk blues or commercial popular songs. This is apparent in works by 2 of the earliest recording bands, the original Dixieland Jazz Band and King Oliver's Creole Jazz Band. Many of their compositions are even labeled as rags. Developments in the orchestra mark the distinctiveness of jazz, both as a development of the ragtime principle and as a direct line continuation of the Africanisms of Congo Square. The musicians and their first northern audiences recognized the original Dixieland Jazz Band's music as an extension of the foxtrot ragtime of the Castles and James Reese Europe. A more abandoned version perhaps, but the same advanced ragtime style.
Why ragtime today? I started performing these ragtime orchestrations at the first opportunity one had. It is a kind of sad commentary on the way we neglect our own American cultural heritage that if you had asked musicians 5 years ago who is Scott Joplin, hardly anybody would have been able to answer the question. I put some of Joplin's ragtime pieces right in the middle of an otherwise classical concert of American music at the turn of the century. And everybody was delighted. All the people were saying, "My God, this music is fantastic. What wonderful melodies, what rhythm. Why haven't we heard this before?"
The spirit of freedom in the ragtime age cross-genders with the inspired compositions of women composers like Amanda Aldridge, Charlotte Blake, Cora Salisbury, Adeline Shepard, Marjorie Kennedy Fraser, Cecile Chaminade, Henrietta Belcher Blank, and others. Ragtime is a music born from freedom. It is uniquely American. It is born of the free expression of peoples from all corners and cultures of the world, shared with each other in joy, pain, grief, and ecstasy. Ragtime is the delicious musical stew of the newly free America, and its musical children went on to change the world forever.